Hello friends, welcome to Programming in Your Hands. This video teaches you about nested loops, part 5. We have already seen about different kinds of looping statements, for loop, while loop and do while loop. And now we will be seeing about nested loops. And there are different types of nested loops for while and do while. So first we will be seeing about the nested for loop, and this is how it executes. You can see a for statement where you have your initialization part and a condition part, then you have an increment part. It works as the same procedure that we have seen earlier, and here inside the for statement you have another for loop, and this is why you call it as nested for. So inside a for statement you have another for, and this for also has an initialization part, a condition part and an increment part. And inside this for loop you have a statement of inside loop. This is the inside loop and there will be statements inside. So as soon as this condition arrives, it checks for the condition. If the condition is satisfied, it gets inside this particular loop and the statements will be executed. Once it sees the closing bracket, it comes and increments the inside for loop, and after incrementing, again it goes and checks for the condition. Now after incrementation, then it checks for the condition. Now if the condition is true, it again gets inside the loop, or otherwise if the condition is not satisfied, where does it go? It comes out of this particular for loop and it starts to increment the next loop. Okay, and this is how it works, and we can see a flow chart of this. This is the initialization part, and first it checks for the condition 1. Now if the condition is true, it gets inside the loop and checks for the next condition, that is your next for loop, inner for loop. And again if the condition is true, the statements will be executed. Once the statements are executed, it either increments or decrements the inside loop. Now again this loop continues. This loop will be continued until the condition becomes false. If suppose after incrementation the inside for loop condition is not satisfied or it becomes false, what happens? It directly comes to this end loop, and then it goes to the outer loop and then it starts to increment, and after incrementation it checks for the condition. If the condition is satisfied, it again goes into the next for loop, that is the inside for loop, and then the set of statements will be executed until this inside for loop condition becomes false. And if the condition is false, again it starts its incrementation part. Now again it checks for the condition. Suppose if the outer loop condition itself is becoming false, what will happen? It comes out of this particular loop and the program terminates. This is how a nested for loop works, and we will see a simple program of how a nested for loop works. Now again it starts with hash include IO stream. Okay, so what is the task here? To display, you have 5 rows of star patterns to be printed with 3 columns. Okay, so now hash include IO stream, you have using namespace std, you have your main program. Now rows is equal to 5, you are initializing your rows to 5, which is an integer. Then you have your columns to be 3, 1, 2 and 3. So you have your columns to be initialized to 3. Now it comes to the for loop, outer for loop. Now outer for loop, you remember that it is for your rows, and the inner for loop, it is for your columns. Okay, so you can see a different color shade given for the outer for loop and the inner for loop. Now what will happen for the first for loop? We will check for the condition now. First int I equals 1. Okay, so 1 is less than or equal to your rows, number of rows is 5. Okay, condition is satisfied. 1 is less than or equal to 5. Now where does it go? Yes, it automatically enters inside the loop because the condition is true. Now it checks the inside for loop. Okay, now inside the for loop you have another j variable which is an integer. So j equals 1. Now 1 is less than or equal to, what is the column value which is initialized is 3. Now j, that is 1 is less than or equal to 3. Yes, the condition is true. So it gets inside the loop and you can see a double quote here, which means the statement will be printed as such. Now you have a star here, so star will be printed as such, the first star. Okay, and then it sees the closing bracket. Now where does it go? Yes, it goes and increments the inside for loop. Okay, so now this inside for loop is being incremented. Now j is incremented, so j becomes 2. Now it checks for the condition 2 is less than or equal to 3. Conditions get satisfied. So it comes inside the loop and again another star will be printed. You can see another star to be printed. And then it sees the closing bracket. Again it increments. Now your j becomes 3. Now 3 is less than or equal to 3. Yes, the condition is true. So again it comes and then it prints star, this star. So again it sees the closing bracket. Now it increments j. Now your j becomes 4. 4 is less than or equal to 3. Condition is not satisfied. So where does it go? Yes, very good. It comes outside the for loop. So this statement will be printed. What is this statement? This is endl. What does endl mean? It comes to the next line. So after this third star to be printed, it comes to the next line. Okay, and now it sees this closing bracket. After it sees this closing bracket, it increments your I. Now earlier I was 1. Now your I is incremented and your I value has become 2 now. Okay, 2 is less than or equal to 5. Yes, the condition is true. So where does it go? It gets inside the loop. Okay, now you have int j equals 1. Okay, 1 is less than or equal to 3. Condition is satisfied. Again it starts from 1. So 1 is less than or equal to 3. Condition satisfies. So it gets inside the loop. A star will be printed in the second row. Okay, so now again this will be after printing star. You can see the closing bracket. Your j gets incremented. Now j becomes 2. 2 is less than or equal to 3. Condition is true. So star will be printed again. And for 3 also the star will be printed again. Now after 3 your j gets incremented to 4 now. So now 4 is less than or equal to 3. No, condition is not satisfied. So where does it go? Yes, it comes to the next line. So see out endl. So now it comes to the next line, which is my third row. Okay, so it comes to my third row and then it sees the closing bracket. Now this gets incremented. Okay, so now after incrementing your I equals 4 now. So for 4 again the condition will be checked and your output will be printed. Similarly you will have 5 rows and there is a star that is being shaded in a different color, so you are not able to see the 5th row. I am sorry for that. Okay, so there will be 5 rows of stars being printed and 3 columns of stars being printed. Hope you understood how a nested for loop works. And next comes the nested while. Okay, inside, like in while also you have nested while statement happening. So now while, when will be the while statement working? Yes, only when the condition is true. So now while it checks for the condition. If the condition is satisfied, it gets inside the loop. Now again you have another while. Yes, it checks for the condition. Now it will also get inside the loop only if the statement is true. Okay, now it enters in and the statement is now printed. So now it sees the closing bracket. Okay, and then it checks for the condition again, and then if the condition becomes false, what happens? It comes to this particular statement of outer loop. After printing the statement of outer loop, it sees the closing bracket. Now it goes again to this particular while condition, outer while, and it starts executing. Okay, and now this is about your nested while. Now comes your nested do while. When will be do while working? Even if the condition is false, the do while statement will be executed at least once. Now you have a do part here. We are telling our system to do even if the condition is going to be false. Now inside do there is another do. Okay, and then this is your inside loop. So now you are telling again the system to continue even if the condition is false. So now you have while and the condition. The condition will be checked now. Now if the condition is true, again it goes to the inner loop and this will be performed. If the condition is false, what will happen? Yes, it comes to the statement of outer loop and then it sees the closing bracket. Now it checks for this while condition. Now again it goes to the do loop and executes. And this is how a while and a do while nested part works. Thank you and wait for more videos. Stay tuned.